So many companies pour a ton of money and effort into these big performance measurement systems, but so often they just fall flat. They're supposed to be this engine for success, right? But instead, they end up creating more headaches and frustration. Today, we're going to dig into the real reasons why that happens, and we're going to use decades of solid research to find the answers.
So let's just start with a number that should honestly stop any manager in their tracks. Research suggests that a whopping 70% of projects to implement these systems fail. 70%. Just think about that. That's a huge waste of time, money, and morale. So what on earth is going on here?
Well, to get to the bottom of it, we can't just rely on gut feelings or one-off opinions. The real answers are buried in the data. And thankfully, researchers have been digging into this exact problem for a long, long time.
So let's follow that trail together. First, we're going to look at exactly how they uncovered the root causes behind all these failures.
The deep dive we're exploring today comes from a fantastic research paper by Flavio Cona, José Denise Carvalho, and Rui M. Sousa, all from the University of Minho in Portugal. These are the folks who did all the forensic work for us.
Now, they used this really powerful method called a systematic literature review. And just to be clear, this is not your average Google search. Nope. It's a super structured scientific process. It's designed to find pretty much all the relevant evidence on a topic, which makes their conclusions incredibly solid.
And you can really see the rigor of this process right here. This chart lays out what's called the PRISMA method. They started with over 3,500 different publications. Can you imagine? Then, through this super careful multi-stage filtering process, they're screening titles, then abstracts, then the full articles. They narrowed it all down to the 31 most critical studies that really get to the heart of the problem. That, my friends, is how you find the signal in all the noise.
Okay, so we know the method is legit. Now let's get to the good stuff, the results. It's time to pull back the curtain and unmask the real obstacles that are causing all these systems to crash and burn. Get this. Across those 31 core studies, the researchers identified a grand total of 175 distinct obstacles. 175. That number alone tells you this is not some simple problem with an easy one-size-fits-all fix. So how do you make sense of all that chaos? Well, use something like this. This is an Ishikawa diagram, also known as a fishbone diagram. You can see the problem, the failure of the systems, is the head of the fish. And then the main bones coming off it are the 6 big categories they sorted all 175 obstacles into. We're talking about culture, the system design itself, the data, the people involved, the technology, and of course the actual performance indicators.
Now this chart really helps us zero in. See, out of those 6 categories, 3 of them are responsible for the vast majority of the issues. Problems with the system design, flaws in the indicators being measured, and issues related to the people. You add those 3 up and they account for almost 70% of all the problems found in the research. We're getting very, very close to the main culprit. But we can actually go even deeper, because hiding in all that data is one single obstacle that stands head and shoulders above all the rest. The top offender? It all comes down to bad metrics.
Take a look at this chart. It ranks all 19 of the specific types of obstacles they identified. And yeah, you'll see a lot of familiar issues in there, things like a lack of connection to strategy or a blame culture. But just look right at the very top. There's one bar that is way, way longer than anything else.
So after all that digging through decades of research, what is the single biggest reason that performance measurement systems fail?
And here it is. The number one obstacle by a massive margin is the use of inappropriate indicators. It was mentioned 35 separate times in the literature. That's more than double most of the other problems. This is such a critical insight. The problem usually isn't the fancy software or the weekly reports. It's the very foundation of what you've chosen to measure in the first place.
So what exactly makes an indicator inappropriate? Well, it can be a whole bunch of things, right? Maybe you're measuring stuff that isn't actually connected to your company's strategy. Or maybe your metrics are accidentally encouraging people to do the wrong things, like competing when they should be collaborating. Maybe they're just old and totally irrelevant now, or they're so focused on short-term gains that they're killing your long-term health. Or heck, maybe they're just so complicated that nobody even really understands what they mean.
Now, it would be really easy to just stop right there and say, okay, team, fix your metrics. But as the research shows, the problem is actually a lot more tangled than that.
One of the most critical findings is that these obstacles don't exist in a vacuum.
They are all deeply connected. They influence each other, creating this tangled web where one problem makes another one even worse.
This network map does a great job of showing that domino effect. Every circle is an obstacle, and the arrows show how one causes another. Let's just trace one single path to see how it works. Say, top management involvement is low. Well, that can easily lead to a toxic blame culture. That culture, in turn, directly leads to low employee involvement. It's a perfect storm, a vicious cycle where a leadership problem creates a cultural problem, which then creates a people problem.
Okay, that's enough about all the problems. Let's pivot and talk about the solution. What does all this research tell us about how to build a system that actually works? Well, the paper lays out a pretty clear foundational sequence of steps, and I want you to pay close attention to the order here. It all has to start with building the right culture, one that's focused on learning and improvement, not just pointing fingers. Only then can you get real, genuine commitment from your leadership. That leadership then has to make sure the system is linked directly to the company's strategy. And once all that is in place, you can finally sit down and design appropriate indicators, and the last piece of the puzzle, involve everyone. Make it a tool for them to succeed, not just another bureaucratic chore from management. So let's just boil this all down to the absolute key takeaways. First, culture is the bedrock. A blame culture will sink even the most technically perfect system, period. Second, the system has to serve the strategy. The researchers even suggest frameworks like Hoshin Conry to make sure everyone is pulling in the same direction. Third, your indicators have to be balanced and clear. They point to standards like ISO 22400 as a good guide for manufacturing metrics. And finally, you have to remember the whole point of this. It should be a helpful tool for your people, not just more red tape.
And that really brings us to the final question, and it's one I want you to take back to your own workplace. Is your performance measurement system truly a tool that helps people get better and drives real improvement? Or, if you're being really honest with yourself, is it just another part of that 70%, an obstacle course that's actually getting in the way of progress?